welcome to the latest episode of the CyberEdge. I am joined today by one Thomas Pace of Netrise. By way of introduction, Tom is a retired Marine. I know they don't like to say former or ex. And from there went into cybersecurity on the practitioner side as an engineer. Did some ICS/OT work. From there, transferred over to the customer-facing-ish side by way of BlackBerry and Cylance, and did that for a while, ran their worldwide consulting practice. And now, for the last 4 and some change years, is the founder and chief executive officer of Netrise. Tom, welcome, buddy. It's good to see you again.
You as well, sir. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So what I wanted to do was, wanted to touch base on a couple points. One, you have an interesting story, so just wanted to kind of go through your career arc, right, and how you kind of pivoted a couple times and got to where you are now, right? I want to hit on, take that and extrapolate it out on the entrepreneurial path. How did the process of going through fundraising with various different rounds look for you, pitfalls, success stories, stuff like that? And then we want to hear about anything cool and upcoming that Netrise has going on, kind of pre-RSA and looking into the future.
Awesome. Sounds like a good agenda.
So walk me through your background in terms of kind of how you started off in this game.
Yeah, out of high school, I'm one of those weird folks. Well, that just period right there. There's nothing else to even add after that, frankly. But weird, lucky, whatever, where I kind of knew what I always wanted to do. I always knew I wanted to do something in cybersecurity. I didn't even really know what that meant at the time. I just know I liked it. And so out of high school, I went to some college that I wasn't a giant fan of, as a computer science major. And then whenever the wars really kicked up, I dropped out and enlisted in the Marine Corps infantry, like all cybersecurity professionals do. And so I did that. And frankly, that the time in the Marine Corps was really just I don't know, a life break. So maybe not the right way to say it, but for me, I guess for me, it kind of was like, man, that I'm going to go off on some tangents and I'm sure that's what you're looking for anyways. But people, anytime it's like we're having like a rough go of it for any number of reasons, people were always like, oh, well, at least you're not in Afghanistan or something. And I'm like, oh man, send me back. Like that was so much easier for me. I don't really know what that is, but
Why? Is it so much easier?
you know, there's not a lot to think about. I think that's probably the biggest part of it. Um, you're not responsible for you're responsible for the health and safety of the people around you, obviously, and yourself, but everyone's kind of on the same page. Like you've been training together for a long time. I mean, you're not responsible for managing your life outside of that, really. And for me, I was a early 20s single guy. I had no responsibilities whatsoever. Like I had nothing going on outside of that. And being overseas was just the best. It was just like, I'm here to I wish running a startup was like that, in the sense of I'm just going to wake up and do work all day. And sometimes it's like that. It's why I like my weekends so much, frankly, is to get work done, and not be bothered all day long. Um, from, recruiters podcasts. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, Drew. Yeah.
100%.
So, but I still did a lot of I was like the resident IT expert, because, the Marine Corps in general doesn't have a ton of those, especially in the infantry. So yeah, I did a lot of that and then got out. I was only in for 4 years. That's all I wanted to do. And, went to Iraq, went to Afghanistan, and then went to school, finished undergrad, finished grad school, did some work for the Pittsburgh Police, did some work for this like FBI affiliated place called the National Cyber Forensics and Training Alliance. Worked at PNC Bank doing security engineering and incident response in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from. And then I left and moved to New Orleans to work at the Department of Energy. Had to go back and get a clearance again and do all that. And lived in New Orleans for 5.5 years. Um, I did a bunch of stuff at DOE. It was a great gig. I was doing security engineering. I was doing a lot of tools implementation and configuration and monitoring. I think I deployed Bit9 and Carbon Black and FireEye and a handful of other things back then, which were all the rage. It was great. Did a bunch of ICS security stuff, which obviously lended itself to what we're doing now. Just it was really good firsthand experience, firsthand practical experience, highlighting how difficult the problem was to determine: are there vulnerabilities? Are these software components in these devices? Yes or no? And we just didn't really have a way to do it back then. And so you could use a bunch of like open source stuff or reach out to the device manufacturers and do all that, but it was not a scalable or reliable approach really at all. And so after that, I took a bunch of SANS classes, and one of the classes I was teaching, a guy named Eric Cornelius was teaching it, who you may know. He's now the CEO of Conceal, I think is the name of the company. Um, but he was at a company called Cylance, and he was like, "Hey, you should come work here." And I was like, "Okay." I was looking for
Yeah.
something at the time, and I started off doing like ICS and incident response consulting, and kind of worked my way up relatively quickly. Um, Ended up becoming a global VP of on various things. Um, Handled a lot of ransomware cases. I did a lot of our IoT firmware and embedded system practice work. Uh, I frankly did a lot of product stuff as well, but I was really kind of like an overlay for the whole company in some kind of interesting way. It was a great gig. It was a great gig. And I've said it a million times that if we didn't ever get acquired, um, I just and we would just I don't think I would have left. Uh, I really enjoyed my time there. Stu gave me a lot of opportunities, and I was able to capitalize on them, I guess. So that worked out. And so from the experience I had in working with like the IoT firmware embedded system stuff, we were working with massive customers. It was just kind of obvious to me that the market had a big gap in terms of the things, the capabilities that it was looking to acquire. So everybody was basically just doing services engagements, which just have all the downsides of a services engagement.
Yep.
Uh, it's not continuous. It's not consistent. It's not repeatable. They're typically expensive. All that kind of stuff. And so, uh, I asked a bunch of people at the time, "Hey, how feasible was it to build something like this?" And most of the people I talked to said it's not feasible unless you got a boatload of money or like whatever. And I said, "Okay, perfect. Sounds like a good
It
idea
made
for
your
me."
antennas go up.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I think anytime you ask people those kinds of questions and they go, "Yeah, it's pretty feasible," um, and then it's not done, that doesn't make any sense. You're really looking for the things that are not feasible,
Yep.
that everybody doesn't think are possible, um, and those are the things you probably want to go try and pursue. So that was a positive indicator for me, which once again, I think a lot of people would view that as a not a positive indicator, and I've seen that thought process happen with for folks I talk to who are like, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a company," and they're like, "Here's one of my ideas, but I think this is impossible," and I'm like, "Yeah, go find out, man. Like if you think it's impossible and you do it, it's probably going to work out pretty good."
Yep.
Uh,
Those are the ones that change the game. That's for sure.
yeah, and so I've always had a very um, like risk on attitude, in life, and in basically every facet of it. So But yeah, so we started this thing in December 2020. Um, just me and my co-founder and one other guy to start. And 4.5 years later, we're still kicking, still growing, still doing great things. Raised 25 million so far, and yeah, so that's a bit of a high level overview, but happy to drill into any of those things in more detail.
No, that's perfect. Awesome. What, so you saw the gap that looked challenging before starting Netrise. What was the original functionality of the first product that you should put out to market? What problem did that solve?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we originally were focused on only firmware and embedded operating systems. So basically, just the code that was running on devices, IoT, ICS, medical devices, embedded systems in vehicles, satellites, telecommunications equipment, all that kind of stuff. And that's a very real market. It exists. Uh, you can get a venture backed return in that market only, in my opinion. I think it's just like hard because the TAM for something like that is enormous on paper, but practically speaking, it's a lot smaller. Uh,
Seems like it'd be very disparate too.
yeah, I mean, it's just I think there's a lot of misconceptions
Uh-huh.
around a lot of these things. I mean, there are a lot of very large device manufacturers who just don't even have product security teams. I mean, it would be like a big company not having a CISO, kind of, right? You're just like, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
Uh, but there's a lot of them, and there's not like a strong desire from all of these companies to have great visibility and do the right thing and whatever. So we were doing fine going after those companies, and we have a lot of the biggest and best ones as customers. But it was just obvious to us that okay, if we can do what we can do for firmware, doing it for everything else should be much easier. Um, and that is exactly true, right? Windows applications, containers, virtual machines, ELF binaries, for Linux, even mobile apps, all that kind of stuff is just way easier. Uh, and we we had to solve a bunch of um, much more difficult problems in the firmware space just through the nature of what it is, uh, that really helped us out with all the other things. So that's a great, like intellectual property moat from a technical perspective that we developed kind of organically. Um, and so that's where it started. And now it's turned into a lot more than that. So we're not only doing firmware and embedded operating systems, we're doing all the other things like I mentioned. We're doing, reachability and validation. Uh, we're operationalizing the data. We're selling to not just the people who build these things, but also the people who use them, which seems very obvious at this point, is the much bigger market and area where you're going to solve more problems. Um, and then you get those folks to push back on the people building the things because they're the ones who have a bigger incentive. I'm just a smelly vendor uh, trying to sell them something. But if their customers are approaching them and saying, "Hey, why is there a software component in this brand new thing that's 20 years old?" That usually generates a different outcome for folks. And those companies are going to make those changes for everyone, not just that one customer. So then
Yep.
it's like the rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. That's just going to take a real long time for all that to happen. It's going to take, geez, a decade, probably on the low end. So, uh, but yeah, that's a rough overview of kind of where we started and where we are now.
When you first started off, who was your first customer and who closed it and how'd that look?
uh, our first customer was Robert Morris University. which is a small, I mean, not that small. It's like 20, maybe like just shy of 30,000 students.
Yep.
Um, but it's not like everyone's heard of it. They did make the NCAA tournament this year, which is pretty
For
funny.
sure.
Yep. They lost to Alabama in a pretty close game, actually.
Mhm.
Um, the CISO there is someone I used to work with at PNC Bank
Okay.
back in the day, and he's an awesome guy. And he's super, forward leaning on a lot of this stuff. And I closed. I mean, I closed our first. I don't know. It'd probably be we'd probably be better off talking about the deals I haven't closed. Um, but yeah, I mean, we showed him what we were capable of doing, and he was like, "Everyone's gonna want this." And I'm like, "Boy, do I hope your optimism flows into the market." Uh, and it was just one of those things that was really obvious to him. And it's one of those deals where we've given him more than he's paying for the entire time, and frankly, so is he. So that's been a great kind of relationship there. Um, and we've been able to prove out a bunch of things working with him in that environment and all that.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, so that was the first one, and then our next, and that was a small deal, um, like thousands of dollars. And then our second deal was for $125,000, which kind of, I mean, I remember like getting the PO for that one. I mean, for the first deal, we got a check in the mail that I still have, that I'll never get rid of. You know,
Did you
uh,
cash it?
yeah, but I kept it.
But
Because
that,
I just mobile deposit stuff, so
yeah.
you're not, you don't have to lose it. Um, I have all the checks that we've ever gotten from them because they're the only customer that pays us with a check, which I kind of
Yeah.
love.
Okay.
Um, yeah. And then the second one's for 125K. This is even before he went GA. Um, and I remember like, and that was not a friendly. We didn't know any. I created a relationship like just from starting the company and blah 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 blah. And I remember just being like, someone's giving us north of $100,000 to do some stuff for them, and it just boggled my mind. Uh, you know, I'm one of these people. Like, I don't know. Uh, Maybe eventually I'll get used to it, but I'm still not used to it. I'm still not used to people paying us a bunch of money for stuff. I don't know, feels weird.
Get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, I try to do it every day. So, uh,
You
but
brought up a good point about how you did a lot of the initial deals and have throughout, and I think you recently just changed your go-to-market model. But the concept of founder-led sales is an interesting one, right? You've obviously managed it successfully. Do you think, though, by and large, it's a good thing or can be a hindrance to growth for startups?
I mean, the answer is definitely both. Uh, here's what I would say. Um, I should have. I definitely should have brought someone in sooner. Um, I was just so frustrated with that process, and not like getting the people I wanted, or that's not the right way to say it. Not getting the right people for us at the time. That I was just like, man, I'm just going to go do this on my own because I know I can do it. Um, did that probably was that a did that work? Yeah. Um, was it the smartest thing to do? Probably not. I mean, we grew 600% last year, ACV, and like, I don't know, 850% TCV or something like that. So, we can talk about the results being like the ends justifying the means, I guess, but that's not a. I mean, and I'm doing it again this year, to some extent. Uh, but I think there is a you can definitely slow your growth if you stay in it too long. Um, I think that there's a it'd be good to see some data on this, which I think would be hard to get, but I think that if you get the right person from day one and you're like a non-salesy founder, that's probably pretty good situation to be in. Um, you know, uh, at the same time, I was able to get a bunch of deals done because I know people and I've sold a lot in the past. So, it just depends how your company is constructed. I have a great technical co-founder, obviously, so I didn't need to handle that part really. Um, I prefer that. Like to me, that makes more sense. Um, but having having brought someone in sooner, I think is pretty obviously would have been a good idea. Everything happens for a reason. I'm happy where we're at. I'm thrilled with the guy who's running the show now. I'm thrilled with the sales team we have now. So, you know, no regrets or anything. But um, founder led sales is an interesting dynamic for sure.
A lot of my customers do it, and a lot of them say, "Nope, I got it. I know this better than anybody." And then there's others, to your point, that are like, "I'm not a salesperson by trade. I don't. I want to sit and do other stuff." So I guess it depends on the person ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't. You just run into a physics problem at some point, um, and that definitely happened with me, right? Where it's just there's not enough hours in the day to like do it all. Um, Trust me, I've pushed that pretty hard for a number of years. Last year in particular, this year for different reasons. Hiring all those people, getting them onboarded, getting them ready to go, prepping for RSA, getting. I mean, it's just been a different kind of founder led motion, getting everyone up to speed. Which man, I can tell you, like I can feel some of it rolling off me finally for the first time in a long time. Uh,
Nice.
which is, yeah, it feels weird. Like today, I'll give a great. I had a call today with one of my sales guys, and I get on these calls with them, and if I'm on the call, I'm talking. You know what I mean? I'm not a spectator. That's just not who I am. So, uh, and so I really appreciate him calling me and saying this or asking me or whatever. He was like, "Hey, we have this call this week. It's with a big prospect. It's going well." And he was like, "Would you mind if I just lead the call?" You know? And
Check.
yeah, yeah. And I was like, "Yeah, man, I don't mind." Um, and for some of these, it's tricky, right? Because in this case, uh, there's also like a venture capital play. It's a there's a CVC involved. So, um, but you know, I really appreciated him calling me. Like, I don't mind. You know what I mean? Like, I don't mind people saying, "Hey, man, you're driving me crazy on these calls" or whatever it is. Uh, and so I was just like, you know what, man, I'll probably just plan on not even being there. And I've already had a number of calls, so I probably don't need to be. And just the way I run things is just, you know, is different. And I don't. It's funny because I've never been a salesperson. I wasn't a salesperson at Cylance. I closed a ton of deals, but I never carried a quota. I closed more than I think any sales guy most years I was there, just because I just knew what they needed and was able to put that together for them. And it's the same thing here. Uh, One of the big things I think that early stage company sales teams fail at is they view qualification they overcorrect, like they over like focus on qualification. Well, how are you qualifying a deal for a product that didn't exist previously? Like how are you doing that, right? How where are you getting the budget from? Who's the champion? Like, what's the role that you're consistently going to pursue from a persona perspective? Like, those things don't exist. Um, and this is where things are very frustrating from like a venture capital perspective, right? Because on one hand, um, they're looking for a company that has like a consistent, repeatable, go to blah, blah, blah with an established budget. And it's just like, okay, well, then you're going to have all this competition, right? If there's already a budget, it's there for a reason. It's not, they didn't just like create a budget and just be like, well, whenever Netrise finally reaches out to us, we're going to be ready for them.
Yep.
It's not the way it works. And then on the flip side, whenever you say, hey, we have like very little competition in this particular market or whatever it is, we have multiple personas we can sell to, and we're taking budget from all these different places, and so it's a much more greenfield opportunity where you can, blaze your own trail or something like that. So they want something with like no competition and, so innovative that it'll blow people's minds. And at the same time, have this like perfectly repeatable, consistent model. And it's just like, yeah, it's just not the way it usually goes. And so I've had to do that a lot where we bring sales folks on and they go, well, yeah, we couldn't qualify this. And I'm like, God, you have to convince them that this problem exists. You have to convince them that this is a big enough issue. I was like, just think about this in terms of like anything else in your life, right? Like someone has been able to convince you of a problem that you've had that you didn't even know you had. Like, I don't know, buying a supplement or buying, a subscription to something. And you're like, you didn't even know that was a problem before. And now you're paying money to potentially address it. So that's like it's a difficult motion for people to change in their brain. Even for great salespeople at other companies. Like, let's use Cylance as an example. A lot of the best salespeople I've ever worked with were there. However, a lot of those people spent their entire careers selling endpoint security products with a unbelievably well understood go-to-market motion in buyer, in pricing, in partners, and here's how you prospect, and here's how you get opportunities, and here's like it's just it wasn't real different whether you were at McAfee or Symantec or Sophos or Cylance or CrowdStrike, wherever. Now things have kind of changed because all those things are platforms now and whatever. But then you bring that person and they're like, oh, I was early on at Cylance or some of those companies, and they come into an environment like this and they just can't do it. It's very different. And that's just like a thing like I kind of wouldn't have predicted maybe at the outset, but has definitely happened. And that's not a unique experience for sure. But yeah, that's some of my tales of
Nice.
selling in
So
the
you
early.
mentioned before how a lot of the VCs looked at things initially and were like it didn't fit that perfect little kind of bailiwick that they wanted it to be in. Let's talk about your VC journey in terms of the different stages you've gone through and kind of some lessons learned and things that you can share with the greater audience.
Man, well, we've raised I think a total of 4 times. The outcome of all of those has been unbelievably positive. Like it's always worked out great.
Mhm.
Um, Getting there has been has just been brutal, man. For a number of reasons. You know, what I would tell people is however much you think you're prepared to raise, like double it maybe. Um, you know, having customers and having revenue growth and all those things obviously matter. Um, but being able to tell the story um, and is probably more important, I think. Um, I mean that just has to be the case given it's still happening. You still have companies raising these $100 million rounds at $1 billion valuation that don't have a product and don't have anything, or a $50 million round with a company with 2 million in ARR in a hyper competitive market. And you're just like, what am I not understanding here? Um, you know, um, I would also say, like, I'm a pretty aggressive person, but man, you like can't be aggressive enough when you're raising around in terms of like how ambitious you are about what you're hoping to do. And I think that's really important. But for me, I've always been more of a realist when I communicate to investors. And I think that probably hurt me in some ways. Uh, you know, I've gotten some one investor who I really I respect immensely um, said something to me one time, which basically along the lines of, "We get lied to for a living," right? Which obviously is the case. Or people are what's the word? Exaggerating at a minimum. And he's like everyone doesn't do this, but people are going to just discount what you're saying by some arbitrary percentage. And so walking, because what I've always done is just tell people this is what we're going to do, and then we've done that.
Yep.
But that's faulty. That is somehow like a mistake. Um, you know, I should have been telling people we're going to do 10 times what I thought we were going to do. And maybe we would have raised more money than if we came in under that. Like, oh, okay, well, everyone comes in under what they're supposed to say. And you're just like, huh, okay, that hurts my brain. Um, and then, I closed a lot of big deals last year. Uh, like four of them were seven-figure deals. Um, two of them were multi seven-figure deals. And, you know, when I closed the first one, I remember like even my own investors just being like, all right, you're going to be good. This will be a piece of cake. Well, it wasn't. And then two more happened, and everyone's like, all right, now it'll be a piece of cake. Nope, still wasn't. And I mean, I remember one investor I was talking to from a firm that is super well respected, like we were talking to everyone who you would think. And one, one, one statement. I mean, I have so many good quotes from raising money that, but one was, "You have too many seven-figure deals." Like
What?
that's one I'll never forget. Um, and you know, the point that they were making, which I think is obvious, was like, there's a concern around revenue concentration and blah 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 blah. And I mean, I'll tell exactly what I said at that moment was, how do you expect me to react to that sentence? That's what I said. And they obviously didn't have a
What they
great,
say back. That's
yeah, they
interesting.
didn't have a great response. They just kind of like laughed and they're like, yeah, we're not sure, Tom, actually. And I'm like, okay, good, because I don't know what I could say. I
That's
don't know what I could possibly say that would make any sense after you saying that. Um, and like the point I was trying to make was, hey, I need to get to these numbers, and this is the way I'm going to do it. And if I would have told you at the beginning of the year that this is what I'm going to do, what would you have told me? And they were like, that it's impossible. And I'm like, right. But here we are. Um, and the other part was like, hey, do you guys think I found the only four? Was that it? Did I tap out the market single handedly? Probably not, you know?
I mean, you are a great sales guy. Let's be honest. So,
I mean, yeah, maybe I did just find the only four. But, and that's just obviously not the case. And so just you have to contend with these things that you're just like, it just blows your mind, I think, in a lot of ways. Um, so, uh, but yeah, I mean, like the most recent one um, was it's just hard. It's really hard to figure out. Like you read all these articles and everybody or all these podcasts, listen to all these investors, and what I have, and everybody who's a first time founder, I think just goes through this, right? Where you're like, all right, I'm gonna, I'm gonna be the first one to figure this out. And you're not. You're not gonna be the first one. Uh, like I know what they're looking for, and you just don't know what they're looking for. Um, and you have to. It's a really frustrating thing when you think you're doing all the right things, and the business might be going like this. Like it could be like everything's going in the right way, um, and still you're just like you can't break through. Um, and this is where I think maybe I feel like I've always been this way, but I'm sure being in the military didn't hurt. Like I'm just going to die before I quit. So, you know, like that's helpful. Because you can it's weird. I feel like almost in my mind I could feel when I was getting to different breaking points of like, okay, 80% of people would have quit here at this point. Uh, the next 10% would have probably quit here. And then the next 5% probably would have quit here. But I made a decision a long time ago that this is it, man. This is what I'm doing, and I'm not going to quit. I don't. If I have to run the company by myself somehow, that'd be rough. But that's what I'm gonna do.
Love
Um,
it. Love it.
so yeah, but everyone doesn't just people think you can like learn that or something. Like you just can't. That's real.
Each one of them wants different things too. I remember going through that process and getting feedback from one VC. Like, you need to do X. I'm like, all right, cool. Went and changed our slide deck. Went to the next one. They
Oh
wanted
man,
what we had in
I,
before. And it's like, what's going on here?
I have made. I've had so many crazy things happen like that, where another founder of a VC firm that people know. Uh, and man, my interaction with this guy was amazing until it wasn't. Um, and we were working over the weekend on changes he wanted to see, like in the deck for the partner meeting come Monday, and like all this stuff. Um, and it was great. I was like, we'll see what happens. And it was a great uh, like meeting and all that. And then poof, just gone. Never heard from that person ever again. And that what I have found out about that is most like a lot of my investors like had a hard time like believing it. And I was like, guys, here are the email threads. Here's like, and they were just like, there's no way. And I'm like, do you guys think this is rare? Because it isn't. Um, it's not rare at all. But no one talks about it for reasons that are confusing to me. Um, and I don't know. I guess people are afraid that they're gonna like at what like it's not like I'm out there name dropping or something like that. Like I mean, trust me, I've wanted to plenty of times. Um, and then on the other hand, you might be raising and talk to someone and it's not a fit or whatever for some reason, and they write you back a 4 paragraph response. That's awesome. So it's just like anything else in life. You're just going to have a spectrum of great and not great, you know? And I think just a lot of people expect, including me initially, that it's always going to be great, right? These people are controlling a lot of money. They've had a lot of success. They've started and sold companies. They've whatever, whatever, whatever. So they're just going to always exemplify that. And it's just not true. Uh, so just have to.
So, last thing I wanted to go over. So, obviously, RSA is coming up. What are Netrise's plans? What do you got cooking?
Yeah, it's gonna be busy. So this is the Monday before, and I fly out there on Wednesday, so in 2 days. Um, we were having our board meeting out there. Usually it's in Austin, but we're gonna have it in San Francisco, um, since I have to be out there anyways, because we're also doing the IoT Village at B-sides
Nice.
San Francisco this coming weekend. Um, and then we rented out the Grove restaurant again with Quiet AI and Stu. And then another company, Sierra, is joining us and Volncheck. Grove life, baby. Um, yeah, it's great. And I mean, we have a bunch of dinners. My calendar is obnoxious, frankly. Um, but yeah, the whole sales team will be out there, and we're excited. It's going to be super super big for us, and we have some product announcements that we'll be releasing. I think it's on Monday or Tuesday. So that's coming. Um, but yeah, that's the basic gist.
Exciting stuff, man. Excited to see you out there and see what the announcements look like and see your new team in action. So very cool stuff.
Yeah, should be great. I'm looking forward to it. I really enjoy, like, if it was up to me, I would just be at a security conference constantly. I li-
I think I think you pretty much are, aren't you?
Yeah, it is a lot. I'm just way more productive when I'm around people
People.
and
Yeah,
doing
agreed.
stuff. Sitting in my office for 12 hours a day is, you know, I do it, but
Every
I'd
now
rather,
and then you get to do a podcast and mix it up. It works out well.
yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, I really enjoy these kind of things. So I was happy whenever you reached out, man.
Good deal,
So
buddy. Well, thanks for your time. Thanks for hopping on. Much appreciated. Definitely wishing you continued success along your journey, and I'll see you next week.
thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
All right.